So far in Splatoon 3, pretty much every mid-season update for the past 3 seasons, we get a map rework. A certain map gets taken out of the rotation for a bit, and then when the mid-season patch drops, the map is back, but better, and with poles, except Undertow. That got a hole for some reason. At the time of recording, since I have no idea when this will be out, 3 maps have been reworked so far. So I think now is probably a good time to look back and see if they were successful at actually fixing the maps. But before that, it's probably worth establishing why the maps need fixing in the first place. It's a very well-known fact that the maps in Splatoon 3 are an issue, to say the least. I think to best understand the issues with the maps in their current state is to talk about how they affect me as an Inkbrush player, because I'm an Inkbrush one-trick and I lack perspective. So as it stands right now, the main issue with the maps is their linearity. They lack flanks and off angles, and generally just force people down specific choke points across the map. And what this means is the current design flaws of the maps really devalue and weaken playstyles iconic to weapons like Brush. In order to distract the enemy, you kind of need to be in an off angle, which you can only really do by flanking. On top of that, these maps have little to no cover, with nowhere to safely distract. If too many players collapse on me while I attempt to flank, there isn't anywhere safe for me to go. I've just got to get as far into the enemy team's spawn as I can before I finally go down. It's not uncommon for me to get like 12 to 13 deaths in a 5-minute game because of this. Now don't get me wrong, I find this quite fun, but the maps limit my options so much that it's kind of the only thing I can do. My only other option really is to sit back, spam bombs, and use my special to push rather than flank. And my issue with that is, first off, why even use Brush at that point? Why not just switch to Splattershot and spam Zookas instead of play Brush? And second is, have you seen Brush's kits? This is a major factor in why I think the kit system in this game feels worse than in previous. If you're a short range weapon like Dappledorlies and your kit has no bomb and a weak special, your only option really is to run full QR by Mobies and run it down until something good happens. And so these reworks are exciting since they give the devs the opportunity to take these flawed maps and fix them, to rethink how they want the map to work in order to make a more pleasant experience for everyone. For me, an Inkbrush one-trick who lacks perspective, a successful map rework should do probably 2 things. First, and most importantly, they need to add flank routes. There's no getting around this. There needs to be ways to bypass these really awkward choke points in mid to gain access to side angles. That way I don't have to run it down every game, I have other options to get to these positions. Second, we need to add some interesting terrain. A lot of the maps, the release maps especially, have an issue with being too open. There's very little cover to hide behind, and it can make a lot of longer range weapons, especially the one-shot chargers, feel very oppressive. Hence we had the pole updates early on. But we need a bit more than just the pole updates. Having terrain also creates room for playmaking, to cleverly move around and between cover, which is both exciting for the players involved and for any viewers. A bonus point for Reworks is that it gives the option to add some colour to these maps, because some of them need it. I'm looking at you, Hammerhead. It looks like it's still in beta. At the time of making, we've had about 3 reworks. It's about time we ask if they've been successful. And I'm going to start on a positive note, because credit where it's due, these reworks have added some interesting terrain. Mincemeat is probably the best example, where they added this weird block on the left drop that protects you from the people on the truck, and makes for an interesting object to fight around. The pole in mid also makes crossing the bridge a lot easier, and makes standing in court here a bit less like a fishbowl. In the most recent rework, Undertow Spillway, the weird wall on Snipe I actually quite like, as again, it makes fighting here feel more interesting and gives shorter range weapons, like Brush, a slight advantage. The highlight of the Undertow rework was actually the cave, or cubby, or whatever you want to call this. It honestly makes the map feel a lot wider, and straight up just creates an off angle that didn't exist before. But my positives have to end here, because while they do add terrain, they don't always add enough. For all of Tower Control, Rainmaker and Clan Blitz and Mahi, mid still feels like a sniping range, and playing short range weapons on Mincemeat and Undertow still feels kind of miserable, in my opinion. But what saddens me the most has to be how these reworks have made little effort to actually rework the map. Nothing actually changed about how you play on any of these maps. No new routes were added, they still play out exactly as they did before. As much as we praise the cave/cubby in Undertow, it is worth recognising that this doesn't actually change how I approach the map. It doesn't give me new options so much as it somewhat enables stuff that I was already planning on doing. Stalling the right zone on Undertow was something I already did, but now I have a small wall I can hide behind while doing it, and that's it. That's all it does. It makes options that already existed slightly more viable, but adds no new options, despite our lack of options being the issue. These reworks change so little that honestly I struggle to call them reworks. Now this, I think, is a bit concerning, since how the devs handle reworks like these speaks to their priority when it comes to map design. You would initially think that given how much the community cries out about how bad these maps are, these map reworks would be in response to this. But since the reworks failed to address the vast majority of our criticisms, I would beg to differ. They feel less like reworks and more like slight touch-ups, a quick polish, quickly putting the cherry on top before they go to work on something else. And I think I know why this is. It's no secret that Splatoon 3 is a rushed game and was released in what was essentially an unfinished state. Hammerhead. The same goes for the previous two games as well, but at least they both had an excuse. What I find pretty interesting is that the 3 maps we've seen reworked so far were also part of the 6 maps that appeared in the Splatoon 3 Splatfest World Premiere. This is a bit of a crackpot theory, but I think the sentiment is at least based in reality, because I wouldn't be surprised if the maps they're reworking are the ones they rush to complete just in time for the 14 development that would see the world premiere split off from the main game. I wouldn't be surprised if the map reworks were just the devs finishing off the maps now that they have time and aren't working towards a release deadline. Now, while this is just me speculating, if I'm correct, I can make predictions from this. If my theory is true, the next 3 maps to be reworked would have to be maps from the world premiere, so Scorched Gorge, Hilltail Alley, and Museum. Regardless of how correct I am, the fact remains that despite the improvements to these maps in the reworks, these changes are not enough to solve the design issues inherent to the maps. In practice, what this means is that the maps are just as bad after reworks as they were before, and personally I think that's quite unfortunate. I'm a competitive player, meaning I get to be picky about what maps I play on. If Undertow is just as unplayable after the rework, it's unfortunate, but oh well. I can just continue to not play it in scrims and continue to not add it to any of my map lists. But if you're a casual player and you're at the mercy of whatever Nintendo decides to put on the rotation, this is going to feel pretty bad. If I boot the game and see a tower control rotation with Mincemeat and Undertow, despite both these maps being reworked, I wouldn't exactly want to have to play on that. Unfortunately, there's not much we can do about it either. Outside of just modding the game and making our own Project M but Splatoon, the only thing we can really do is hope that either the next few reworks actually do seek to address the issues holding the maps back, or that these reworks target already good and playable stages like Mako Mart and Dingblot. Either way, at least they're trying to improve the maps. I'd take that over the game being neglected. And that's all my thoughts on the rework so far. If they do something interesting with any future reworks, I may revisit this topic in the future, but with that, hasta la vista.